Oops, my petty revenge accidentally cost my ex a fortune. It started, like most things that end spectacularly, with a Tuesday. A Tuesday filled with spreadsheets, lukewarm coffee, and the kind of fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look vaguely ill. I was hunched over my computer at Continental Insurance, meticulously cross-referencing claim data, when Mark called. "Hey babe," he said, his voice oozing that practiced charm that had once made my stomach flip. Now it just made my teeth ache. "Hey," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. We'd been together for 3 years and I'd foolishly envisioned at least 30 more. We talked about marriage, kids, the whole shebang. We even picked out a ridiculous name for a dog we'd never owned, Bartholomew. "Listen, I'm swamped. Meeting with some investors about the Riverbend project. Can we do dinner tomorrow?" Riverbend. The name alone made my skin crawl. It was Mark's pet project, a massive luxury condo development he was spearheading. It was also the reason he'd been working late, dressing nicer, and smelling faintly of someone else's expensive perfume. "Sure," I said, already knowing tomorrow night would never happen. He dumped me the next day at a trendy bistro downtown. Over overpriced appetizers, he delivered the news with the practiced ease of a seasoned professional. It wasn't me, he said. It was him. He needed to focus on his career. The Riverbend project was demanding all his attention. Blah, blah, blah. Then came the kicker. "There's someone else," he admitted, avoiding eye contact. "Emily. She understands the pressures I'm under. She's supportive." Emily. I knew an Emily. A vapid blonde who worked as a junior marketing assistant at Mark's firm. Young, ambitious, and clearly willing to bat her eyelashes to get ahead. I managed to maintain my composure until I was safely back in my tiny apartment, clutching a half-eaten container of ice cream. Then the dam broke. I cried. I screamed. I threw a decorative pillow at the wall. It was a pathetic display, but I was allowed. I'd just been dumped for a younger, shinier model. David, my best friend since college, arrived armed with pizza and a shoulder to cry on. He listened patiently as I ranted about Mark's arrogance, his ambition, and his complete lack of empathy. "He's always been a user, Sarah," David said, shaking his head. "I never understood what you saw in him. He was charming," I mumbled, burying my face in a pepperoni-covered slice. "And he made me feel special." "He made you feel used, more like it," David retorted. "Forget about him. He's not worth your time." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one whose heart had been ripped out and stomped on. As the evening wore on, fueled by pizza and cheap wine, my anger began to simmer. I started thinking about the Riverbend project. I knew how much it meant to Mark. I also knew a secret, something he'd confided in me during one of our late-night pillow talks. He was exploiting a loophole in an old insurance policy to secure a crucial piece of financing for the project. The policy belonged to Mrs. Higgins, an elderly woman who had been a client of Continental Insurance for over 50 years. It was a relic from a bygone era, a quirky, outdated policy that no one had bothered to update. And Mark, ever the opportunist, had found a way to twist it to his advantage. "He's using Mrs. Higgins' insurance policy to get the funding?" David asked, his eyebrows raised. "That's shady even for Mark." "Tell me about it," I said, a dangerous glint in my eye. "He thinks he's so clever. He thinks he's untouchable." That's when the idea sparked. A tiny, insidious seed of revenge. Continental Insurance was notorious for its bureaucratic red tape and its obsession with compliance. I worked in the claims department. I had access to Mrs. Higgins' policy. I could flag it for a routine review. Just a routine review, nothing malicious. Just a little nudge in the right direction. "You wouldn't," David said, looking at me skeptically. "Wouldn't I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. The next morning, I went to work with a newfound sense of purpose. The pain was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was overshadowed by a flicker of excitement. I was going to make Mark pay. Not in some grand, dramatic fashion, but in a subtle, insidious way that would drive him absolutely crazy. I navigated the labyrinthine internal database, pulled up Mrs. Higgins' policy, and flagged it for compliance review. I made sure to use all the right codes, all the right jargon. I even added a few notes about potential irregularities and unusual payout structures. It was all perfectly legitimate, of course. Just standard operating procedure. My supervisor, Mr. Thompson, barely glanced at the request. He was too busy worrying about his golf game and avoiding any kind of responsibility. "Just make sure everything's documented properly, Sarah," he mumbled, waving me away. Perfect. The next few weeks were a masterclass in passive-aggressive pettiness. I watched with a perverse sense of satisfaction as the gears of the insurance bureaucracy slowly began to grind. Mrs. Higgins' policy was shuffled from department to department, reviewed by countless analysts and managers. Queries were sent, forms were requested, and meetings were scheduled. Mark, of course, had no idea what was happening. He was too busy celebrating his impending success with Emily, flaunting their relationship on social media. I saw the pictures, the fancy restaurants, the exotic vacations, the smug smiles. Each post was a tiny jab, a reminder of what I had lost, or rather what I had been replaced with. Then the phone call came. It was Mark. He sounded agitated, almost frantic. "Sarah, have you heard anything about Mrs. Higgins' insurance policy?" I feigned ignorance. "Mrs. Higgins? No, why? The insurance company is investigating it. They're saying there are some discrepancies." "Discrepancies?" I repeated, my voice dripping with innocence. "That's terrible. I hope everything's okay." I could practically feel his frustration radiating through the phone. "It's complicated. Look, I need to ask you something. Have you been messing with her policy?" "Messing with it," I gasped. "Mark, how could you even suggest that? I would never do anything like that." He hesitated, clearly torn between believing me and suspecting the truth. I don't understand what's going on. This policy is crucial for the Riverbend project. If it falls through, falls through." I echoed, my heart doing a little dance. That would be a shame. All that hard work gone to waste. I hung up, a triumphant grin on my face. My petty revenge was working. As the weeks turned into months, the pressure on Mark intensified. The insurance company's investigation dragged on, uncovering more and more irregularities. The financing for the Riverbend project was put on hold. Investors grew nervous. Deadlines were missed. I watched, from a safe distance, as Mark's carefully constructed world began to crumble. He became increasingly irritable, snapping at his colleagues, neglecting Emily, and losing that polished veneer of charm. He looked haggard, stressed, and dare I say, miserable. Emily, too, started to show cracks in her facade. The constant pressure and Mark's increasingly erratic behavior were clearly taking a toll. The social media posts became less frequent, the smiles less genuine. I even heard through the grapevine that they'd had a major fight at a charity gala, culminating in Emily throwing a glass of champagne in Mark's face. I'll admit, I felt a pang of guilt. I hadn't intended for things to get this bad. My initial plan was just to cause Mark a little inconvenience, a minor setback. I hadn't anticipated the domino effect, the way my small act of revenge would unravel his entire life. I also felt a twinge of sympathy for Mrs. Higgins. She was an innocent bystander in all of this, an elderly woman caught in the crossfire of my petty war. I knew the insurance company was bombarding her with paperwork and phone calls, confusing her with legal jargon and bureaucratic nonsense. One afternoon, I decided to pay Mrs. Higgins a visit. I found her in her small, cluttered apartment, surrounded by stacks of insurance documents. She looked bewildered and overwhelmed. "Oh dear," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't understand any of this. They keep asking me about my policy, but I've had it for so long, I can't remember what it even covers." I sat down next to her and gently explained the situation, simplifying the complex legal terms and reassuring her that everything would be okay. I didn't tell her that I was the one who had started the whole mess. I couldn't bring myself to do it. As I helped her sort through her documents, I realized the true extent of Mark's deception. He hadn't just found a loophole in her policy, he had actively misled her, manipulating her into signing documents she didn't understand. He had preyed on her vulnerability, exploiting her trust for his own gain. That's when my guilt turned into something else, something stronger, something more righteous. I wasn't just getting revenge on Mark for breaking my heart. I was protecting Mrs. Higgins from being exploited. I was holding him accountable for his unethical behavior. The climax came a few weeks later. I was at work, sifting through yet another pile of claim forms when Mr. Thompson summoned me to his office. "Sarah," he said, his voice uncharacteristically serious, "the investigation into Mrs. Higgins' policy is complete. We've decided to close the loophole." I tried to look surprised, but I couldn't suppress a tiny smile. "That's unfortunate," I said. "Unfortunate for Mark Thompson," Mr. Thompson corrected me. He was relying on that loophole to secure financing for the Riverbend project. "Now, the deal is dead." I nodded, trying to maintain my composure. "We also discovered some irregularities in the way Mr. Thompson handled Mrs. Higgins' policy," Mr. Thompson continued, his gaze unwavering. "It appears he may have misled her about the terms of the agreement." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected this. "We're not going to pursue legal action," Mr. Thompson said, "but we are going to report our findings to the relevant authorities." Mr. Thompson's reputation is compromised. I left Mr. Thompson's office in a daze. My petty revenge had inadvertently cost Mark a fortune and potentially ruined his career. I felt a strange mix of emotions: satisfaction, guilt, disbelief. That evening, Mark came to my apartment. He looked like a ghost of his former self. His clothes were rumpled, his hair was disheveled, and his eyes were bloodshot. "You did this, didn't you?" he said, his voice hoarse with anger. "You ruined me." I didn't deny it. "You ruined yourself, Mark," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "You were so blinded by ambition, you didn't care who you hurt along the way. You used me. You used Mrs. Higgins. You thought you could get away with anything." "I was building something," he protested weakly. "I was creating jobs. I was contributing to the economy. By exploiting an elderly woman," I retorted. "By lying and cheating your way to the top. That's not building anything, Mark. That's destroying everything." He lunged at me, his eyes filled with rage. I flinched, expecting him to hit me. But he stopped short, his face contorted with a mixture of anger and despair. "I hate you," he spat before turning and storming out of my apartment. I watched him go, a wave of relief washing over me. It was over. I was finally free. The fallout from Mark's failed development was swift and brutal. The Riverbend project collapsed, leaving a trail of lawsuits and broken promises in its wake. Investors lost millions. Mark's reputation was tarnished beyond repair. Emily left him, apparently unwilling to stick around for the financial ruin. As for me, I received an unexpected promotion at Continental Insurance. My attention to detail and my ability to identify critical issues had been recognized. I was offered a position in the compliance department, where I could use my skills to prevent similar situations from happening in the future. I also made a point of helping Mrs. Higgins navigate the complexities of her insurance policy. I explained everything to her in simple terms, ensuring that she understood her rights and her options. I even helped her find a new insurance plan that better suited her needs. One day, as I was finalizing her new policy, Mrs. Higgins turned to me with a warm smile. "You've been so helpful, dear," she said. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "It was my pleasure, Mrs. Higgins," I said, feeling a pang of guilt. "You remind me of my granddaughter," she continued. "She's a good girl just like you, always looking out for others." I smiled, a genuine smile this time. "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins." As I left her apartment, I realized that my petty revenge had inadvertently led to something more meaningful. I had not only freed myself from Mark's toxic influence, but also helped an elderly woman who had been exploited and taken advantage of. I had used my skills and my knowledge to make a positive difference in the world, even if it was in a small way. Mark, I heard, eventually moved away, seeking a fresh start in another city. I don't know what happened to him, and I don't really care. He made his choices, and he had to live with the consequences. As for me, I learned a valuable lesson about the unintended consequences of our actions. Sometimes, even the smallest act of revenge can have a ripple effect, impacting lives in ways we never imagined. And sometimes, karma has a funny way of working, delivering justice in the most unexpected forms.